The United States government has released official files documenting an extraordinary series of UFO encounters over a sensitive military testing facility. Glowing orbs came within approximately 10 feet of a government helicopter, formed organized patterns around it, and pursued military aircraft. Senior intelligence personnel witnessed the encounter. Federal personnel captured infrared imagery and photographs, and the FBI formally interviewed one of the senior officials involved. But that is not the most extraordinary part of this story. Jordan Flowers, executive director of the Disclosure Foundation, says the Office of the Director of National Intelligence deliberately conducted an operation to lure these objects into appearing, and that the operation was wildly successful. The government did not simply detect UFOs, it created the conditions to bring them in, and they came. So let's dive into Jordan Flowers' analysis and look at how he ascertained that the Office of the Director of National Intelligence deliberately conducted an operation to lure UAP into view.
So what has been your overall opinion of the release of these files? Do any of them prove or disprove theories about UFOs? You must have been so excited to get your hands on any new information.
What I think is really interesting is when you combine the info releases. So there's been 4 releases of information over the past several weeks, right? And when we combine that information and synthesize that with some of the comments that members of Congress are making about classified briefings that they are receiving, we end up reaching some astounding conclusions.
So regarding Flowers conveying that some of the comments that members of Congress are making about classified briefings they are receiving, I want to share such comments. In this extraordinary clip from about 3 months ago, Representative Eric Burleson goes into a mind-blowing classified briefing he received regarding the ODNI intentionally luring UFOs into view. Let's play that clip.
I was briefed on an event that occurred where they basically tried to set up a perfect case scenario where that would cause UAP to come in and then to capture them or to try to try to document them or record them, and it was very successful. So this is when this only happened a few months ago, and this is when the whole conversation changed because that event was one that no one could deny. There were so many people that witnessed these things, and these were all credible people working in our top intelligence sector, and they brought me in and briefed me on this almost within a few days or weeks after this event happened. So, I feel that was nice that they did that. They knew that I was researching this topic. Since then, that is the briefing that everybody wants.
Yes.
So the other members of Congress have heard about this. Leader Scalise wanted the briefing. He got the briefing along with a couple of other members. I had only told Leader Scalise about this, and now everybody wants this briefing.
As an American citizen, I want this briefing. Let's start with what kind of technology are you using to lure UFOs into view? I mean, say what?
Just based off of information that's publicly available. So for instance, the December 2025 incursion in the southwestern United States over a sensitive military facility, the ODNI was conducting, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence was conducting a UAP luring operation. That operation was wildly successful. That operation has FLIR video, photographs of orbs that they encountered as part of that operation. That resulted in an FBI 302 interview, as well as a personal statement from senior intelligence officials at the ODNI. And that precipitated a classified briefing to members of Congress like members Scalise and Burleson and Burchett.
Recall that Representative Burleson said in that clip I shared earlier that this is the briefing that everyone wanted.
This event was described as incontrovertible proof that there's a real phenomena here and a core reason why transparency efforts have accelerated over the past few months. what's really interesting about that is when you synthesize that with, Congressman Burleson's comments made in public and with the information provided, it was an operation that it assumes that not only that AARO, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and the ODNI know that this is a real phenomena, but they already have the technology and methods with a proven track record to lure and attract these things.
So if they really do have the technology and methods to lure anomalous craft into view where they could be perceived and recorded and studied, the obvious question that is begged is, how long have they been engaging in luring UAP, and what exactly have they learned?
So, suffice it to say, we need to synthesize what members of Congress are saying in addition to the data releases here. And when you do that, you are able to reach some astounding conclusions with publicly available information.
Speaking of astounding conclusions, consider the following. A successful luring operation implies a persistent, local, and responsive UFO presence, meaning craft of unknown origin and provenance. And if there is this presence, and if it encompasses non-human intelligence, then what Representative Burleson and investigative journalist Ross Coulthart say in the following clip rings true.
I mean, look at what we were in today. I felt a great sense of history in that Kennedy caucus room this morning.
Yeah.
We're sitting in the room where the Titanic disaster was investigated, where the Watergate hearings were held, where Iran-Contra was exposed. It struck me, we're on the cusp of perhaps uncovering the biggest secret in human history, if this is true.
It would be. I mean, to me, it would be the greatest revelation since Jesus Christ, since the birth of God.
I want to go deeper than the alleged December 2025 UAP luring operation conducted by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. I want to explore the possibility that some of these orbs people are encountering are literally sentient, living expressions of consciousness.
I certainly don't have the compendium. It's a continuum from corporeal bipedal type life to, what I would consider like sentient plasmoid life. But there are several that the U.S. government is aware of.
Sentient plasmoid life. How quaint. Now, that was from the July 9th press conference on the steps of the Capitol with UFO whistleblower David Grush, filmmaker James Fox, journalist Leslie Keane, and others. And it was very powerful. Now, the current head of AARO, which of course is the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, the UFO investigation program, the Pentagon, his name is John Kozlowski, and he is completely aware of the reports of anomalous orbs. Journalist Mark von Rennenkampf shared a clip from him that is fairly recent, but let's read what he had to say. Orange orbs and black triangles. Following DOD AARO Director Kozlowski's appearance on Star Talk Radio, we know that this UAP was triangular. At the same time, orbs, often fiery or orange, have been widely reported since at least World War II. So let's play the clip.
The first one was brought to us by a law enforcement officer out west, where he observed a large orange orb floating several hundred feet above the ground a couple miles away. He went to investigate what was going on with that orb. And as he was pulling up to the location where he thought would be below the orb, about 40 to 60 meters away from some object the area was well lit, he saw a blacker than black object. He said it was about the size of a Prius, 4 to 6 feet wide. And as he got 40 to 60 meters away from the object, it tilted up about 45 degrees, and then it shot up vertically. He says 10 to 100 times faster than any drone he's ever seen before. And it did that without making a sound, as far as he could tell from inside of his vehicle. And just as it left his field of view through his windshield, then it emitted very bright red and blue lights that illuminated the inside of his vehicle as brightly as if someone had set off fireworks just outside his vehicle or street flares. So That's anomalous because of the size of the vehicle with the great acceleration. And when he came back to investigate that area, he found no disturbance of the ground beneath it.
Now, do I think orbs are interacting with humanity and have been for quite some time, whatever they may be? The answer is yes. Because too many credible people over many decades have asserted that they've seen these mysterious orbs. So I think it's happening. So our orb education is continuing with Merrick or Marek. I can't remember the pronunciation, but he writes, journalist for The Hill, and I quote, UFO and consciousness, legendary Navy SEAL ADM William McRaven, JSOC SOCOM commander who oversaw the bin Laden operation, participated in the recovery of remains of 9 service members. He and his team observed 9 orbs above the recovery site. Let's play that clip and check it out.
So now we have found the remains of the plane, and again, there were some. We eventually bring some of the family out that was fit enough to be there. We did manage to find some bone fragments, and we buried those at the site. But in the book, I tell the story, and I said you can believe it or not, but it is true, and I'm not the only one to have seen it.
So this accounting is corroborated, which gives it more epistemological weight.
As we are kind of burying the remains of this thing, and I say a little prayer over this cross we put up there, and as I get through saying it, all of a sudden one of the guys turns to me and goes, "Hey, sir, take a look up there." And again, if you can imagine, we're in this bowl, and I think it goes up to about 8,000 feet or something like that, and right above the ridge line, I see what looks like a parachute flare. I'm thinking, is somebody shooting parachute flares? And I'm looking around thinking, well, maybe one of our guys is, shooting parachute flares. And nobody's shooting parachute flares. And there's one, and there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they're kind of hovering up there.
Pay special attention to where he says in just a moment that there were 9 victims on the plane, because it correlates with the amount of orbs seen, which is intriguing.
And looking around thinking, what in the world? And the guy says, hey, sir, how many of those do you see? And again, it's just this kind of glowing orb, and it's just kind of floating up there, and there were 9 of them. And there were 9 victims on the plane. And it was up there for 10 or 15 minutes. They all kind of hovered up, and then one by one, they just kind of went up. So I said, look, you can believe the story or not, but I'm not the only one that saw it. And I've often thought, well, if somebody was firing parachute flares, please let me know, because it was kind of one of those surreal moments, because you are out in the outback where there is nothing out there.
Admiral McRaven himself raises the possibility of parachute flares. But parachute flares, once deployed and burning, descend. They don't ordinarily rise one by one as he said he saw. That doesn't prove these objects were paranormal, but it does mean the movement he described is difficult to reconcile with the explanation he offered. That is an extraordinary story, and certainly gives weight to the idea that some of these orbs might be expressions of consciousness. If that is the case, then that makes the UFO taxonomy allegedly existing in our world far more complicated than the idea that they're all exclusively technological craft. Disclosure would be quite the ontological whopper, don't you think? Marek continues the education. He writes, simply stunning. New USAF Undersecretary ex-fighter pilot Lomaire describes a remarkable UFO incident. DoD Aero's ex-deputy director described fiery orbs. Identical UAP reported since World War II. I am now comfortable sharing that I very briefly have seen the same phenomena. Let's play that clip.
I was watching a documentary that was done in 2020 called Phenomenon. I was watching it with my wife late at night, and it was probably 45 or 60 minutes into this documentary. We had air traffic controllers talking about a phenomenon that they occasionally see at their airfields. It's not common, it's rather rare, of these balls of light that seem to zip around the flight lines and be able to defy the known laws of physics. incredibly fast, and they were like big orbs of light, orange or yellowish in color.
Notice how in the next moment, Matthew talks about how James Fox's movie, The Phenomenon, jogged his memory about something that happened to him. This underscores how important James Fox's film was, because it can literally help people to realize that something that happened to them that they may not have put sufficient weight into was actually really substantial and potentially revealing of deeper layers of reality.
And I paused the film, and I remembered, as odd as that sounds, that I'd seen the exact same thing in high school when I was in the mountains in Arizona. And I told my wife, I said, I've seen this. I know exactly what they're talking about. And she said, no, you haven't. I said, no, I really have. And she says, we've been married for 10 years. You've never mentioned this once. And it's true. I hadn't mentioned it because it was one of those things I'd never understood. It was a very peculiar experience. I was with another girl at the time when I saw this. And so I said, look, come with me. We're going to go to Facebook. We're going to go online, and we're going to send a message to this girl I've not reached out to in 20 years. And I'm going to say, hey, remember me? Remember that time we were in the Tucson mountains, which is exactly what I did. I said, do you remember that thing we saw? And I didn't say anything else. And she responded back immediately. And I was like, hey, be careful. My wife's here with me. I don't want you to embarrass me. And she said, yeah, that big freaking ball of light UFO thing that we saw. And my wife was surprised that, in fact, it was just as that documentary Phenomenon had depicted it.
Just like with Admiral McRaven and the 9 orbs corresponding to the 9 victims, Matthew's experience was also corroborated. And yes, I think that matters.
And what I shared with my wife thereafter, and had always been puzzled about, was that this ball of light that we saw descending down over our head got close enough for me to look at it and into it, and it seemed to be buzzing with life, but it wasn't man-made. It was very well organized, very spherical, and it seemed to be very conscious of the two of us that were sitting there in the Arizona mountains, like it was observing us. And it was a distinct impression that I had, that I was being watched, observed, that there was a level of interest from the orb to us, and it frightened us. And so we got up and we ran to the car and we ran away, and that thing zipped up and disappeared in the sky.
It's not Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. More accurately, it's orbs, orbs, orbs.
We need to keep our eyes on the orbs and figure them out.
I couldn't agree more. Now let's analyze what Matthew just stated. That is a remarkable recounting of an orb. What caught my ear when he was describing what happened to him, he said a ball of light descended down over a head, getting close enough for me to look at it and into it, and it seemed to be buzzing with life, but it wasn't man-made. Seemed to be very conscious, observing us. Distinct impression I had was that it was that we were being watched, observed, and that it was that the orb itself had a level of interest in us. So the impression I get from his description is that he could intuit or feel that the orb was interested, and that gives you the and he said he intuited that it was conscious, which is not what you would necessarily expect from a craft. So when whistleblower David Grush said that in the taxonomy some of these orbs might be conscious, is more or less what he said, that actually makes a whole lot of sense. And by the way, he is not the only person who has reported witnessing an orb and getting that distinct impression of sentience, of consciousness. The last story we're going to cover in our orb education comes from a person known as Hollywood medium Tyler Henry. Whatever your thoughts are on the credibility of his mediumship, realize that this alleged encounter happened with him, his mother, and his boyfriend at the time, all witnessing the same thing. So it's highly corroborated. I consider it a very compelling case, and we'll have much to discuss. Let me play the clip where I go into his encounter with an orb reading an excerpt from his book. Now it's time to share medium Tyler Henry's extraordinary UFO story. This excerpt comes from his book, Here and Hereafter, How Wisdom from the Departed Can Transform Your Life Now. And I quote, "In 2016, I lived in an apartment with my then boyfriend and parents. One Sunday morning, the printer in the room malfunctioned, and I asked my mom to help me undo the jam. She obliged, and we worked on fixing it on my bedroom floor for about 15 minutes. I was becoming increasingly frustrated, but then, out of nowhere, it happened. Suddenly, the printer I was staring at intensely lit up as if someone was shining a flashlight directly on it. From behind me, a light source was illuminating the room within seconds. A bizarre buzzing noise radiated through the entire room and made my hair stand on edge. My mom and I looked at each other and then turned around to see the source of the light. Only about 6 feet away near the ceiling was a moving light source, bright blue in color. It measured about 3 feet wide and 3 feet long, and I've never seen anything like it. We were stunned. We both watched as this light source near the ceiling began to gradually change. The bright sky blue light that electrified the room began appearing to collapse on itself. And as this happened, it was encircled in a yellow light that floated like a mist. From this mist, golden embers of light fell to the ground onto the carpet below. It lasted no more than a few moments. We watched as the light seemed to collapse under its own weight. When I saw the golden embers begin falling to the ground, I leapt underneath it and tried to grab any residue that fell on the floor. My efforts were in vain. As I grasped at the light with my mom beside me, my then boyfriend walked into the room and his jaw dropped. All three of us were witnessing the single most bizarre experience any one of us had ever witnessed and probably ever will. After only a few seconds, the light collapsed entirely and disappeared. The static noise no longer more than a fleeting buzz. None of us could make any sense of the experience. We took into consideration everything from ball lightning to an electrical malfunction, but none of us could even begin to understand the profound effect the light had on all our lives. We didn't talk about it to the extent that you'd expect. It was a deeply personal experience that impacted us all in different ways. My mom has a hard time discussing it and acknowledges that it was the oddest thing to ever occur to her. My then boyfriend and I still stay in touch, and I recently asked him about the light. Surprisingly, he said that the sound was what initially stunned him. Even before he walked in, the whole apartment seemed to radiate with a noise that he heard in the living room, which prompted him to come into the bedroom where he witnessed the light. The fact that there was no residue from the golden embers left me frustrated and confused. The beads of light that fell from the original source were about the size of a half-dollar bill, and yet they left no remnants or burns on the carpet. Whatever we witnessed that Sunday morning in a small apartment in LA originated from somewhere else. Of that, I am certain.
And it seemed to be buzzing with life, but it wasn't man-made.
My own experience fit the definition of a mystical experience. It was hard to describe or speak about for an abnormal amount of time. It set me down a path of wanting to understand what it was and why it appeared in front of 3 people. It was short, but it was the most overwhelming experience of my life. I won't say that it felt like the presence of God, but there was an indescribable feeling of sentience to the light. It seemed like someone was in the room with me. This forever changed my views on the unknown. And if it hadn't been witnessed by 2 other set of eyeballs, I wouldn't have believed my eyes. End quote. So that was a truly remarkable accounting witnessed by 3 separate people. Tyler Henry, his mom, and his boyfriend at the time. And it's interesting how Tyler said it had a profound effect on all their lives. It's also interesting that this happened inside an apartment as opposed to like outside, like literally in their home. The object, orb-like, maybe it was more shaped like a cube, but bright and luminous. It appeared inside their home, which of course kind of makes it more mysterious than it happening outside. Kind of mind-bending if it actually happened. More like instead of traveling into where they were in some conventional way, it feels like it more teleported, if you will, into where they were. Tyler said there was an indescribable feeling of sentience to the light, and that correlates with what the Undersecretary of the Air Force, Matthew Lemaire, stated, where he felt he got this very distinct feeling that it was watching them, observing them, interested in them. So this orb phenomenon is absolutely fascinating. Goes back many decades, happened in World War II, the Foo Fighters. I would not presume that all of the orbs that are witnessed are all the same thing. They could be multiple things. But I do think that some of them are disembodied consciousness. That's my personal hypothesis. And if that is the case, imagine what happens when we finally get UFO disclosure. Then these stories suddenly become very, very plausible, don't they? You got to change your priors after UFO disclosure, don't you? And so we're going to have to tackle as a civilization with questions about who are we, why are we here, and what else is interacting with us? Where do they come from? Do they come from other dimensions? Do they come from the place we would call the afterlife? Some of them. These are very deep and profound questions that we might have to wrestle with in the not too distant future. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do not forget to subscribe. If you'd like to support my channel, you become a patron, you become a YouTube member, you can give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities can be accessed in the description box below, or you can just slap a like on this bad boy, and I'll appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.